The arrogance of the New York Times and the D.C. press corps generally is just boundless. This piece on Guyana, South America, borders Venezuela to the west, has been a rumored target of Maduro as he destroys his country because of Guyana's oil fields. The New York Times piece, is Guyana's oil a blessing or a curse? Because what the New York Times wants for Guyana is to be the sort of noble victims of centuries of colonial rule, first the Dutch and the British, heroically preserving the Amazon rainforest without giving in to the modern world and to developing and to becoming self-sufficient, because that entails the use of fossil fuels and exacerbating the climate change problem. They want mascots. They don't want independent people, not in America and not in foreign lands. Well, the president of Guyana, Mohamed Irfan Ali, has a different perspective, and it came through fairly loud and clear in an interview with some eco-freak flack for the BBC, who was essentially touting the AOC Greta Thunberg line when it comes to developing the oil sector in Guyana for the benefit of its people. Take a listen.
Let's take a big picture look at what's going on here. Over the next decade, 2 decades, it is expected that there will be $150 billion worth of oil and gas extracted off your coast. It's an extraordinary figure, but think of it in practical terms. That means, according to many experts, more than 2 billion tons of carbon emissions will come from your seabed, from those reserves, and be released into the atmosphere. I don't know if you, as a head of state, went to the COP in Dubai.
Let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. Do you know that Guyana has a forest forever that is the size of England and Scotland combined? A forest that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon? A forest that we have kept alive? A forest that we have kept alive.
Does that give you the right? Does that give you the right to release all of this carbon?
Does that give you the right to lecture us on climate change? I am going to lecture you on climate change, because we have kept this forest alive that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon that you enjoy, that the world enjoy, that you don't pay us for, that you don't value, that you don't see a value in, that the people of Guyana has kept alive. Guess what? We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world. And guess what? Even with our greatest exploration of the oil and gas resource we have now, we will still be net zero. Guyana will still be net zero. With all our exploration,
a couple of
we'll
points.
Still be net zero.
Powerful words, Mr. President. But a couple...
I am not completed as yet. I am not finished as yet. I am just not finished as yet. Because this is the hypocrisy that exists in the world. The world in the last 50 years has lost 65% of all its biodiversity. We have kept our biodiversity. Are you valuing it? Are you ready to pay for it? When is the developed world going to pay for it? Or are you in the pockets? Are you in the pockets of those who have damaged the environment? Are you in the pockets, are you and your system in the pockets of those who destroyed the environment through the Industrial Revolution and now lecturing us? Are you in their pockets? Are you paid by them? Are you paid to keep their message?
No, they're paid by the rent-seeking green sector that's being underwritten by Western governments. But otherwise, other than his riff at the end about the Industrial Revolution, like it was a bad thing, I appreciate not allowing himself and his country to be infantilized from some dandy from across the pond. Well done, Mr. President. Jonathan Lesser joins us now. He's a senior fellow at the National Center for Energy Analytics. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It's about time that we had some heads of state in the developing world or in the industrialized world or somewhere in between start to provide chapter and verse to the West like President Ali did, don't you think?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear him speak, and like you say, I think the riff about Industrial Revolution was a little off base, but other than that, you have a BBC reporter who's very arrogant, who
Yeah.
fails to consider that what the developing world wants is to be developed. They want a standard of living that's like ours, and what we take for granted, healthcare, electricity supplies, travel, shelter, a lot of that's lacking, and they rightly want all of that for themselves too, and we seem to be in this phase of trying to basically keep them poor and miserable, and then making ourselves more miserable as well. At least that's what the goal for some of these people is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shared misery. That's the big vision coming out of the West, generally speaking. And you and Mark Mills write about this with respect to our energy sector, and specifically this EPA mandate that sort of backdoors a transformation of the auto industry in this country by 2032 to EVs.
Well, that's correct, and in fact, the EPA on Good Friday, just last Friday, released a rule about heavy trucks, the large trucks that keep this country going, transporting goods, all across the country, and they want to make electric trucks the rule. And right now, no one even manufactures these trucks in the West. The only one who's manufacturing some of them is China. And the problem is the electric grid is teetering on the edge of failure already, as we shut down coal plants, shut down natural gas plants, and try to replace it with intermittent wind and solar. So what we pointed out was, even if you ignore the problem of electricity supplies being insufficient to electrify all cars and most everything else, what you have is the infrastructure, just building the new transmission lines, finding the transformers. A utility, it'll take years to order a large transformer. We're going to need thousands upon thousands of these. We'll need millions of distribution transformers. Those are the ones that look like little canisters on top of electricity poles running down your neighborhood street. We'll need millions of them. So we'll need materials for all that, and it's just not going to happen given the rate we do things now. None of this is going to happen.
And then,
Go
but
ahead.
like the individual level, I mean, millions of homes, apartment complexes, they're going to need electrical upgrades to accommodate all this.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And so you're going to need a lot more electricians, and utilities are going to need more linemen to install all this stuff. And utilities are already desperate for linemen because the number of people is shrinking. The average age of the workforce is going up. So the labor that's going to be required is not there, and it's not something you can't just hand somebody an apron and say, go work on high voltage transmission lines. They won't last very long.
Although the good news is there was a piece, I think it was in the Journal, about an increasing number of people, young people going into the trades as opposed to college, with the increase in vocational offerings and so forth, and the path towards making money as opposed to piling up debt. So, maybe on the workforce side, it's a possibility, but that still doesn't cure the overall vision problem that the central planners have with respect to our grid, does it?
No, it does not. And right now, our grid simply cannot handle it. The grid operators are warning the feds that this cannot, they can't handle it. We're going to have massive blackouts at the worst possible times, in the middle of winter. Imagine a day in Chicago where the temperature is below zero, there's no wind and sunshine, and the power's out.
Yep.
That'll have a real impact. That's going to result in the deaths of many people.
Something else too about this that I hadn't really considered, but Alyssa Finley had a good column on it about how the move to a green energy grid makes the U.S. more vulnerable to cyber attacks. She writes, so-called distributed energy systems provide an increasing number of entry points to the grid. An academic study last November modeled a case in which a remote attacker commandeered public EV chargers to create electric frequency distortions that led to a system-wide blackout in Manhattan. Such attacks will become feasible by 2030 with increased EV adoption, the authors of the study warn. And you're talking about Biden wanting to install 5,000 public EV chargers by 2030. Finley writes, that's 500,000 potential bots America's enemies could turn into weapons to take down the grid. So the grid failure on its own because of overload, the grid failure, the grid being vulnerable to cyber attacks that can compromise our national security.
That's right, and that's another issue. We didn't, obviously discuss that in our article. But yeah, you've got a national security issue as well. We're relying on China for most of these supplies of minerals that you need for this grid and for all the batteries and the EVs. Almost all of it comes from China, and that's certainly a national security issue on top of the cyber attack issue. So, but either no one is thinking about this at the government level, or they are thinking about it and they don't care. And one of the things we mention is, one way to reduce the demand for electricity from all the EVs are going to mandate is just not let you charge them when you want. Mm-hmm. So they'll just enforce limitations on when you can charge your vehicle, when you can have power.
Well, right. I mean, as they're doing with home appliances, in addition to cars too, right? I mean, they're off in every which direction to regulate your access to the sort of energy that you enjoy to live a life you enjoy.
Well, that's right. More utilities are installing meters that essentially let them shut your power off. Now, some people think, they get a credit on their bill, and some people obviously think that's worth it. That's fine. But when it becomes mandatory, which it's likely to become, then you've got essentially, centralized control of what you can do. Can you travel? Can you heat your home, cool your home? And that's, is that the kind of society you really want to have, or do you want to have an unfettered society where basically you can do what you want when you want? It seems like a lot of people in our government don't want that.
I mean, the other piece of it, too, which you were hinting at, is the price tag. I remember this exchange between Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana and the number 2 guy at EPA from last year, where, you want $50 trillion. Well, for what? What are you going to do with it? No idea. And it's, nice round numbers. It always is at the central planners. You have 50 trillion. Man, why make it 100 trillion? Make it 200 trillion. Why not? If we're just having fun with numbers and printing money. So you have a country that's $35 trillion in debt, that's suffering from, double-digit inflation in terms of how people actually live their lives over the last 3 years, and seeing household income not keeping up with household expenses. And that doesn't even include $100 trillion plus in unfunded liabilities. And we're going to spend $50 trillion over 5 years to transform the economy. It's going to go off without a hitch. Everything will be delivered on time and under budget, and we'll have a brave new world. Sure.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's you've described it very well. We can't afford this. And the thing about it, it's all being driven, obviously, by climate change. And yet, like you mentioned before you had me on, the emissions reductions, for example, the EPA's estimate of emissions reductions from the large truck rule between 2027 and 2055, so roughly 30 years, will be about 1 billion metric tons of carbon. And wow, that sounds like a huge number, except it's less than what the increase in China's emissions last year. It's about the equivalent of less than 1 week's worth of world emissions in 2022. And those emissions just keep going up and up. So nothing we do will have any impact on climate change at all. It won't even be measurable. So we're going to spend trillions of dollars that we don't have to accomplish absolutely nothing except probably enrich politically connected people, and that is driving this whole madness for green energy.
Jonathan Lesser, Senior Fellow at the National Center for Energy Analytics. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Would you go to court without a lawyer when the other guy is lawyered up? Or are you going to go it alone and learn law and procedure as you go? When you have an insurance claim for your home or business, it's the same thing.
This is Dan Lights from Crosscom. We inspect your property, file your claim, negotiate the damages, and maximize your settlement with your insurance company.
Insurance companies will send out their inspectors that work for them, get paid by them, and represent them. Not you.
If we complete the repairs approved by your insurance company, our service is free. Crosscom Public Adjusters has turned denied claims